Hello, welcome to Voices in Leadership, the Leading Age Virginia podcast. We're back after a little bit of a hiatus, an unintentional hiatus, but we are very intentional in choosing our guests for today. So I am Melissa Andrews, President and CEO of Leading Age Virginia, and I'm very excited to have colleagues and friends from Holleran Consulting with us today, who I know, Christine and Katelyn, talking about women in leadership particularly is something that's near and dear to your hearts. So I'm excited to dive in with you today. But to get us started, I'll ask each of you to just kind of share what you want with our listeners about yourself. So Chris, let's start with you.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having us today, Melissa. This is such a pleasure. I'm Chris Walley. I'm the president of Holleran, and I actually am about to celebrate my 2-year anniversary with Holleran. So yeah, it went by really quick, didn't it? So it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
And how about you, Katelyn?
Great. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Katelyn McCauley. I'm the Director of Senior Living Research here at Holleran, and I've been here for a little over 4 years now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, happy anniversary to you both. I'm coming up on my seventh anniversary with Leading Age Virginia in July. And it's kind of crazy how time has flown. But Chris, let me start with you. Can you talk about kind of your career trajectory and what ended up bringing you to Holleran? And
oh my goodness. Oh, absolutely. That's a long story, but I will give you the Reader's Digest version. Yeah. So I actually, honestly, Melissa, never thought I'd be in healthcare. Just never even occurred to me. I started in insurance out of grad school, and I had a very unique opportunity to work then for a trajectory of startups, just a bunch of startups. And I got really into the fact that you wear many hats and you just kind of need to learn the rules and sometimes make them up. So I went from insurance to managed care, did that for a while. And then I moved into some independent consulting. And then I found what I would consider probably my longest tenure, which was with PACE, the Programs of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. So I have a really soft spot in my heart for them. I was involved in opening the first program in New Jersey, then went on to manage like 13 programs in a regional role, all for marketing and sales and communication. And then it kind of brought me all the way around to senior housing, which I had never touched on before, which was with our parent company Tandem, formerly Spectrum. And then I landed at Holleran when we acquired Holleran, and it just seemed like the perfect kind of closing the loop, bringing all that continuum of care together and being able to measure and give communities that valuable insight from the engagement and satisfaction standpoint. So lots of healthcare, worked for hospitals too, and marketing and communication. So bottom line, jack of all trades, master of none, but lots of experiences though.
Yeah. And Katelyn, how about you? How did Holleran come to find you?
Very similar to Chris, of not what I was expecting. Right out of school, I just started looking for places that focused on research. And Holleran was one of those companies. And I've never been in the field of senior living before. So I said, why not? Let's check it out. And I enjoyed and still enjoy the research associated with this field, and then have just come to love the senior living aspect of it.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that. Cause we've got kind of we're misunderstood as a sector, right? Senior living, aging services. So what is it that you both feel drawn to in working with the organizations that you do in the senior living space?
Chris, would you like to go?
Sure, absolutely. I think that when I started in PACE and in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, we call it the LIFE program. It was in a community that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. It was owned by a hospital that I was born in, that I had family that worked there as surgeons and physicians. And picking up the phone and talking with people that I knew, that the art teacher from my high school, being able to reach out and care for seniors just gave me that passion. I was kind of the person that I always shied away from, like, when someone would need medical attention, like I'd be like, oh, I don't know if I can see it. And being with those seniors and learning about them and their stories and knowing that what happened or where they were that minute did not define their entire life, and the things that they've experienced, that, people say they're the greatest generation and they have so much to bring and so much knowledge. I think that's where my passion came from, and the desire to help them live with dignity, and be safe and have a full life just drew me to the industry. After that, I was done. After that, I knew I'd never work anywhere but senior living and aging services.
I love that, you were born in the hospital working with that case site. That's just really, that's some small town USA stuff.
Right?
That is, I to be honest, being in the room with you so many times, I never got that vibe from you. That small town USA. I love that story.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
How about you, Katelyn?
So I've started to find my passion in seeing how the communities that we work with start utilizing this data and utilizing this information, because I see firsthand how much love and energy they put into their job, and being able to support them to give out and give back to the employees and the residents. That's something that I'm passionate about.
That's awesome. So I want to dive more into each of you and your career, but first, just if you were to say, what are the couple of things that you're seeing within your client organizations that we should all be paying attention to, whether there be trends or highlights, lowlights, challenges, just anything you want to lift up that you're learning from the data or just from your regular interactions with these organizations?
So one thing that I have heard is some communities are now looking at 2023 as their fresh start. Now we know what has been happening. We have new standards put into place, and they've been looking at 2023 as potentially a new benchmark, like internally for themselves. They have their past year comparison, but now let's see how we move from here. And I think that's something it's important to be cognizant of. For the last 3 years, there is something that has impacted our field. So to be able to then say, okay, that's what happened, this is how we're going to move forward, I think is such a great testament of our field.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Chris?
I agree with Katelyn. We were saying that this is the year where they can stop looking over their shoulder and they can look up and they can look forward. We have this community engagement needs assessment that we're talking about now that actually encourages them to look outside their walls again, because they have been, and rightfully so concentrated. Yes, they still have workforce issues. Yes, they still have staffing issues. They still have areas where the voice of the resident and the employee, they do want to be heard, but they're able to kind of look at their impact and at a greater level, at a higher level, and see where there's opportunity. And so that's kind of what we're hearing. I'm hearing as well as what Katelyn's saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that resonates with me, particularly, work with a fair amount of organizations around strategic planning and really feeling like they've got their grounding, they've got their feet back under them. And so they can really, catalyze those conversations around where they're going for the next 3, 5, where do they see the community in the coming years. There's like a heaviness then that falls away, right? When you can start having those fun conversations around where do we want to be? Where do we see ourselves going? So I appreciate that like 2023 is the new standard or the new like foundation. We're starting anew. We're all starting anew. I mean, I'm listening to a Mel Robbins podcast. I'm constantly trying to start anew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What's one thing you wish you had known, Chris, when you began your career?
Yeah. So I went right from, like Katelyn, I went right from college to grad school. And I didn't really think I needed like a entry level job. Like I have a master's now, but I hadn't, not a day of work experience, right? Let's be real. So I figured I would just get this job and I would have it for the rest of my life, and I'd start really high up. And because that's what I was surrounded with. My dad worked for a company for many years. My father-in-law was at a company for many, many years. And I didn't realize that, a career is lots of different experiences at different places these days. It's just different. Yeah. And I didn't realize that. I thought that I had to pick a job that was going to be my forever job. And I know things are very different now, and Katelyn will speak to that, I'm sure, because of things that are just different in this day and age. But I really thought that I was going to start way up high And and I have another story that or the same story relates to another aspect we can discuss later, but I thought I'd be there forever. I didn't
Where
know.
did you start then when you graduated with your
Oh
master's?
my God, so crazy. I had your MBA, I had got an MBA. So I had a concentration in marketing and I ended up in an insurance company, and it was a startup insurance company. And I'll just tell you that how this relates to something else. I started working for the president, the owner of the company. And I was like, yes, I will be, I've made it. And one of the things he said to me, which is one of those hard things to hear, was, and these were his words, you will not be able to stay in the ivory tower forever, Chris. You've got to learn the business. And I was like, really? Like, and it was automobile insurance. And I was like, oh, I like insurance. Like, I liked doing special projects. And he said, no, you're gonna, and he did. He jettisoned me right out into the different, I went to underwriting and sales and I had to learn that was the best thing ever. That's the best thing he ever did for me, was make me learn about the industry inside and out.
You know, it's funny, relatable. When I finished the Leading Age Leadership Academy, I had like, what do I want to be? Right? Like, what do I want to be? And I want to be a CEO. And my dear friend, mentor, and adoptive father, Larry Minnick, sat me down and he said, I don't know that I see you having a cell phone ring at 2 a.m. because there's been an elopement on campus. I'm not sure operation, but if you think that you want to be a CEO of a member community, we'll get you into a member community. You're going to start, you have to do your AIT, you're going to have to work your way up, but know that that second cell phone is going to ring at 2 a.m. And he did that. He made introductions for me with people, and I sat down with a potential preceptor who later told me, she was very kind. And she said, no, I don't think this is the route for you. I don't think this is for you. And those tough conversations. And I think I landed in the right spot, right? With my current position. But it is important to have people around you who are going to tell you what you want to hear, and then also maybe not so much what you do hear. Exactly. And that's helpful. Katelyn, how about you? When you went from undergrad to grad, is that what you did as well? And so you were graduating from grad school expecting what in your career? And then looking back, what do you wish you had known?
Well, we all want to make $1 million, right? And so I graduated with my Master's of Science in Psychological Science. So more of the research base, and that's really where I wanted to stay. So I'm lucky that I was able to find a job within that field of research. But I think with that comes as well, not having the experience with senior living, but gaining that knowledge. And I think one thing that I wish I would have learned or known about earlier in my career is you have to be flexible. Mm-hmm. Flexibility is so important because things change. Life is gray. It's not as dichotomous as you would like it. Let me rephrase, as I would like it to be.
Yeah. I say in our world, so, Leading Age Virginia, we're 4 full-time staff, and then we've got part-time staff and consultants and contractors that we work with. But it's not the amount of different hats we wear in our positions on my team. It's the rapid nature by which we have to switch our hats. And if you're not comfortable constantly switching hats, this is like the association world, particularly an association our size is not the place for you. And so there's pros and cons, the pro is there's always something exciting going on. The con is you sometimes feel like you're not finishing anything. Right. And so that's a challenge for sure. So, I mean, you're both obviously students, the fact that, you got your undergrad, you got grad school, you're students. How do you continue to kind of develop yourself professionally? Where do you seek out that continuing education? Because it can get harder the longer in our careers, we are. I'm talking about only myself right now. But yeah, so how do you continue to make sure that you're learning and that you're inspired to keep doing this work?
Yeah, I think I've become, I was always a student of reading, just reading books. And I was very fortunate to be in a corporation where that kind of information and training was given to us. And that was great because when I was in grad school, I had a graduate assistantship and in student activities. And so that's a very a developmental community, right? You're always doing some kind of leadership training and things. And I got out into the corporate world and I was kind of starving for that stuff. If you don't get with the right organization, that's not always there. So I was kind of doing it on my own. So I was reading and things like that, but now gotten a bit addicted to podcasts.
Yeah,
I'm always looking for, girl boss, lift you up, teamwork. I'm addicted to those things. I drive a lot and I've always have a podcast on when I walk, things like that. And just reading. And then also if there's anything in our industry where people will have either webinars and stuff, I want to get on it, even if it's not exactly in my lane. I want to learn about it. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. Sometimes it's a little bit of, supplanting what's lacking and then taking advantage of what's out there and through leading age conferences and things like that. So yeah, it's a hybrid right now.
I'm also addicted to podcasts, but they're mostly of the true crime nature.
Oh my goodness, that's you, right, Katelyn? You love that.
Well, June is soon. So, and we should all know what happens in June.
So wait, what happens in June?
What happens in June?
The Brian Kohlberger trial starts.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, I'm just like wrapping up. Well, that's a whole nother conversation, Katelyn.
Yeah.
We're together. So we don't freak out our listeners, what do you do to continue to, be engaged and develop yourself, Katelyn?
So I think coaching, sales coaching, executive coaching are very structured way. But another way that I like to do it is asking my colleagues, what are you doing? Can I help with that? And getting in on the ground level, because I think also understanding the day-to-day functions and then how it plays a role into what Chris and I put out is very important. And then it also gives me a different perspective. So I can take a typical conversation that we're having with a community and flip it and say, well, have you ever thought about it like this? And continuously questioning. This will lead into one of our other questions, but I was a why kid. That's what I did all the time. And that has stayed with me throughout my career.
Well, that element of curiosity is really important. I'm raising a why kid and it's a lot.
I feel bad for my parents.
You should. I'm just going to say you should. No, but I think that continuous curiosity will serve you well, right? And I think that interest in understanding the people who you're working with and what their challenges are and how they're approaching problem solving, and then being able to give a different perspective. Learning how to ask the right questions, I think is one of the hardest things. And the why questions and the why behind the why is a really important talent. So I say, keep going with that curiosity. It will serve you well and serve the people that you're working with well. What advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? Katelyn, let's start with you this time.
So it wraps into some of what I mentioned before, that flexibility, seeing the gray, because the thing too is our field is ever changing. So you need to make sure that you have the capability to move with the curve, because what is best for the resident right now might not be best for the resident that's moving in 10 years. So how are you able to make that quick shift?
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think it has to do with what I learned in the beginning, just getting into all the different aspects, boots on the ground. I always say that I'm the kind of person that I love to get my hands dirty. You will never find me pointing and, and directing. I'm there. I remember jobs where I would, write a strategic plan 1 minute and then put together a binder and 3-hole punch a binder. Boy, I'm aging myself there. But, I know the paper comes with holes now, but back then we had to put the holes in the paper, making a binder. But I mean, just learning everything about it and not having, tunnel vision. And they always say, like, stay in your lane. I don't think I ever stayed in my lane. Just being curious, and like you said, Melissa, about everything. So you have, like Katelyn said, that bigger picture, and you can apply that. I think the history that I've had, the career that I've had, has led me to being able to see our industry in different aspects and from different perspectives.
Yeah. So I have been really privileged that I've gotten to be a part of the Holleran Women's Retreat for a few years now. And I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about why that is important, the Women's Retreat that Holleran convenes every year. And you have both been a part of it. And so what do you think is important about gathering women leaders in a room for a couple of days in a beautiful location? Why is that important to you personally? And why is it important to Holleran as an organization?
Can I go first?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So this was one of the first tasks that I was given when I took the job as president. They said, "Oh, by the way, we have this women's retreat." And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right. I like event planning. I can do this." And little did I know how special this organization, this opportunity was. I thought it was about the swag bag and the this and the that and the champagne toast. Sorry, I mean, whatever. But it wasn't. It was about the people in the room. And that's really, that was eye-opening for me. So now that we're in the third year that I've been planning it, 7 years total, seeing the dynamic, seeing the sharing, the vulnerability, the motivation, the session that you did last year, Melissa, the squad, the tribe, the team, was just so empowering. And that the balance for me, it's always important between the information they bring back and the refreshed personal self that they bring back is just essential. These women are selfless. They are incredibly dedicated. They're the last ones probably to take time for themselves. And I honor and thank them greatly for the time that they take to come and do this. And it's so important to me that they go back refreshed, refilled. I always say, who fills my tank? I hope that retreat fills their tank and brings them back. And that's why from a women leadership standpoint, it was brilliant. It was all Michelle's idea. I give her 100% credit. We will do it forever and ever, as long as we possibly can. So yeah, it's super important.
How about you, Katelyn?
So I think it's a little different for me because of, now we're getting into some of the ageism, but my age, because when I'm looking at that retreat of not only how can I better myself, but how can I listen to the stories and the experiences that these women have had and make sure that the glass ceiling you all broke, I continue in that direction. Mm-hmm. And it's just having that wolf pack, I think, and making sure, as Chris mentioned, there's a safe space. Yeah. You can be vulnerable. You can have that, because it's not always okay for women to have those emotions and experience that in the workplace, but we make it okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, it does fill my tank. I mean, that's why I prioritize going to it every year when I can. And, I think the data still speaks to the inequity between men and women in the workplace. And so, when people say, somebody said in a group, well, when are they going to have a men's retreat? And so, and another man that was staying with me said, we've been having those, that's just called conferences. Yes. But I think there is something about gathering, and I love, the mix of people who are younger in their career and people who are more veteran in their career. I remember one year having an incredibly robust conversation with women who were nearing retirement around the importance of employment agreements. I mean, the importance of leveling up in terms of pay and all of that. So I think there's like the practical pieces that come from those conversations, but also there's just the learning that we all have challenges and we all put on, our game face to go into work, but that behind that, we all have kids and marriages and relationships and parents and just all of that. And you walk out realizing, okay, I'm not alone, right? Like, and that there is somebody, I might be dealing with something with a young child, but somebody who has gone through that. So I just want to express my appreciation that you do continue doing it. And it is so important. And of course, we'll give Michelle all the snaps because
Absolutely.
it was Michelle's
Absolutely.
child. Let me ask, so Katelyn, you kind of teed this up. So let's talk about the isms a little bit, and have you experienced ageism or sexism or any of that in the workplace? And how do you handle those situations?
So I have experienced both. I've been noticing more the ageism that has come with it more than over the sexism. But in the beginning, it hurt. I reacted. It made me feel a certain way. And, it's saying that you potentially don't deserve something because you're young. And I think every person is different, and every person has different goals and aspirations and how they meet those goals at different stages of their life.
Yeah.
So as I've matured, I've gotten to the place of, okay, let's not react. Let's just start grinding out work and put the nose to the pedal, the foot to the pedal, and be as successful as possible so that I can prove, see, I deserve to be where I am, and I deserve to also be where I'm asking to be.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Chris?
I think that an experience that kind of stands out is unique. I was working for a company that was owned by a group of people that had a specific religious affiliation, very strong religious affiliation, where women just were not viewed as equals, and very particular situation. I was in a conference room. I was sitting next to my boss. Some folks came in. My boss and I stood up. He reached across the room and shook a hand, and I reached across the room and I got this. And it was like, okay, nothing I say during the rest of this meeting will have an impact. It's like I was silenced immediately. Learning, understanding the culture behind that, why. I'll never forget it. I'll never do the same thing. I know now how to react. But in that moment, it literally stifled everything I had to say, wanted to say, should have said during that meeting. And again, it was a very defined thing. And there's been opportunities for it to happen again. And now I know differently, but that's a very specific situation, but that feeling, thinking that anyone would feel that way in any other situation, was very important for me to tuck in the back of my head and never forget.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. I mean, I think particularly in our space, looking at generational differences, looking at that ageism that exists, no matter what the generation is, I think it's something that we all have to be really, cognizant of. And actually at the Leading Age Leadership Summit last week, I heard a speaker talking about generational preferences, and particularly millennial and Gen Z, in terms of wanting immediate feedback or immediate response. Growing up with technology, you get that immediate. And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I understand 3 of my team members in a way that I never had before. And immediately went to them and said, oh my gosh, I so understand. Like, it didn't hit me. So I think the importance of those lessons, right? So one of my student interns, Kelly, she wants a 30-minute check-in. She's got the agenda. And at the end of it, she's going to say, what can I do differently? Always asking me for feedback. And I mean, I got to tell you, I didn't used to ask for feedback. And she's willing to give me feedback, whether I'm ready for it or not, which I appreciate. But I think, all of that, right? It's like you said, Katelyn, is honoring what people are bringing to the table, no matter where they are on the life spectrum, and recognizing that. And I love that, envisioning where you deserve to be. I think that's really an important piece to it. And I think for many of us who were traditional in our careers, Chris, I think you mentioned that, you started in a certain place and you felt like you had to work a certain amount of time in order to move up. And it was a really, like you hoped a vertical, but there were rungs. Whereas now I think it's like, no, I'm going to leap over those rungs. Like I'm going to do that. And that's possible, which I think is really very cool. Yeah. So this has just been such a great conversation. Let me ask, as we start to wrap up our time together, how do you define success for yourself? Or for Holleran? I mean, however you want to frame it, but how will you know, like, they always say when you get to the pearly gates, and St. Peter says, what did you do that was good? And let's say St. Peter cares about professionally what you achieved. How are you going to respond?
So for me, success in what motivates me, it's twofold. Success used to be defined as how many monetary things do I have? Do I have the big house? Can I have the Mercedes? And then a situation, my dad passing at the young age of 58, that completely shifted, because at the end of the day, you cannot take any of that with you. Right. What you have are your memories with your friends, family, how fulfilled you have been throughout life. And so that's how I've been looking at it. As well as in the personal side, I think success is how are the communities we work with, how are they doing? How are they feeling? Is there any burden that Holleran can take off of them to make their lives easier? And when I start seeing that happen and the light bulbs going off for them, I'm like, yes, that's it. That's exactly what we needed to get at. And that's also very exciting too.
Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Chris?
That's great. So professionally, I think it's just feeling fulfilled, feeling that we're accomplishing things, that that we're making a difference. Personally, I have to say I have two amazing adult children who recognize the fact that I've always been a working mom and speak positively about that, and have echoed things that I've taught them, emulated things. And that is really important to me to say. My daughter will always say to me, gosh, I had a conversation today. I sounded just like you today, Mom. That's, and
but she means it in a good way.
Yeah,
absolutely. In a good way. And that's really important to me. But professionally, like Katelyn, I think that there's moments where, you kind of look back from where you came from and you see a level of success because of either a position or whatever. But I think it's more that fulfillment and when things are clicking, like when things are just kind of moving along and smooth and the gears are running smooth. That to me, that's success and that feeling where I feel like I'm whole, and that's not always every day, right? Because sometimes none of it's clicking, but when it's all kind of in unison, that's all good.
What have I not asked you, or what have you not shared that you would like to before we end our time together?
Interesting.
Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
You had asked about, advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you did touch on that. But I think the women's retreat and just how we interact as professionals, as female professionals, is in and of itself empowering. Seeking out other people's opinions, being curious and listening and looking for that feedback. I think that's the it's a big, daunting, heavy lift. But if we can do those kinds of things every day, and integrated into our everyday life, hiring for me, when I'm looking for a new team member, making sure I'm really casting the net so I'm not, drilled down or missing people. That's kind of, I think, what I wanted to just share about that. It's a tough question, and sometimes it's hard for us to say, well, yes, there was this time but I think overall, if we have it in the forefront or in our minds, then, we're living it, then I think it's impactful and hopefully it'll make changes every day.
Yeah. Thanks. How about you, Katelyn? Anything you haven't shared?
Well, I think that this is first of all, Melissa, thank you. I appreciate your platform. And I think you have been a huge leader in women in leadership in our field. And again, for me, at where I am in my career, I look at that and I'm like, thank you. Thank you for everything. Christine, you as well. Like, thank all the women in this field that have done what they have done so that now younger generations can come through and won't potentially have to hit the same roadblocks that you did. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think for me, as I continue to watch women leave the workforce because they're having to make decisions based on work versus family, it is so important. And I think for all leaders in our field, whether you have men that are working with you or female, I mean, no matter what the gender, we have to create cultures of belonging where people can be recognized and bring their whole selves. And that includes what's happening in their personal life. And thinking about how do we get to a point where we can afford and invite more flexibility, for our frontline workforce, for the people that are working hourly. There's so much work to be done. And I know that. But one of the things that I hope is that we can continue to retain, people who have a passion for this, but that also, they have full lives. And I think that balance can be really, really hard, as you said, Chris, and not every day is easy.
Right.
But you're each doing your part to help organizations, create those cultures, to understand where their team members are, where their residents are. And so I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do and your continued support and engagement with Leading Age Virginia. Selfishly, it's really big fun to work with you. And I don't say that to everybody, and I certainly wouldn't invite them on the podcast. Yeah, just kidding. We love all everybody.
We are privileged.
We're a little special.
Yes, we are privileged. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And to those of you who are listening today, thank you so much. We appreciate that you are also part of the conversation as we lift up voices and leadership. So thank you, Chris and Katelyn, for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Well, I feel energized after that conversation. That about you?
I do too. I love their energy. I love their comments about, the Holleran women's retreat and all that. It's just an amazing, I've never been, but whenever you come back, it's always like, this, the energy you get from them, the wisdom you get back from everybody. And I was thinking about that as Katelyn was talking, and she said something about being flexible with your career. And I said, no career is black or white. It's always a gray matter. And I thought, we have to be open to not only seniors and older folks and their wisdom, but the younger folks as well. Be open to their thoughts and ideas, and they should have a lot of things as we go through, into the coming years for senior living.
Yeah, it also spoke to me just about the power of this community and the fact that, it's one thing to need CEUs, right, and come to an event, but for people to choose to engage, whether it be in the podcast we just recorded with them, or the Holleran Women's Retreat, or when you convene the Chaplains Network, right? Just the power of people coming together to share and support one another, and to lift up. I also loved Katelyn's observation around 2023 being kind of reset.
Yes, yeah, I see that as well. And I'm going to give a plug for them, because both of them will be doing a session at our conference on resident and employee engagement. So they can continue the conversation around the things that they did talk about today. But yeah, I think to me, it lifts it up for the younger generation. And if everybody would send this along to, people coming out of college, let them know that there's a lot of passion and power in senior living, and it's a great place to work.
It is that. And I also just want to one more time highlight the fact that Chris was talking about the hospital sponsoring the PACE where she works was the hospital she was born in. I love that. But they are two fabulous women leaders, and I'm so glad we got to talk to them today. So thank you, Paula, for being here.
Sure. Thank you.